Welcome back, everyone. My name is Blakemore. I'm the Deputy Director at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. I'm here with David Sandalow, the inaugural fellow at the Center for Global Energy Policy at Columbia University, part of several stakeholder interviews here at the COP in Sharm el Sheikh, where we're discussing what our expectations are for this COP, how we see that changing the landscape for energy security and climate action looking out to the next year. David, thanks for joining us today.
Reed, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. I guess I might start at a high level. What are your expectations for this COP? We're at a critical year, a critical moment where energy security and climate action seem to be at something of an intersection, right? We're trying to make sure that we, proceed down the pathway towards resolving the urgency of the climate challenge while not sacrificing the need for energy security and affordability. How do you see the conversations here in Sharm el Sheikh evolving in response to that complicated intersection?
Well, Reed, just to date myself, this is COP27, right? I was a U.S. delegate at COP1 as a member of the National Security Council staff.
Okay.
So I've been around these COPs for a long time. By the way, COP1 was held in Berlin, Germany, and the chair of that conference was a dynamic young German environment minister by the name of Angela Merkel, who went on to some very good things. She was a superb chair of the conference. So I've seen these meetings go up and down and evolve over the past 20 or more years. Mm-hmm. We spent about 20 years developing the architecture for how countries are going to work together on this. And I feel like at Glasgow last year, some of the core pieces were finally put in place. We have a framework of Paris, we have a rule book. Now it's all about implementation. And that's been the theme here at this COP, as you said. That means stakeholders of all kinds coming together and pledging and actually to take action and then actually taking action. And so we're building up a way of looking at that and making sure that countries and companies and other stakeholders are actually doing things. So you asked, what do I hope to see from this COP? I hope to see lots of pledges and lots of actual demonstration of real action to address the climate change problem. That means mitigation, that means adaptation from a wide range of stakeholders. And there's been a big focus, as there should be, on developing countries. I think it means mobilizing finance for developing countries. I think that means both public funding and private sector funding. And head of the U.S. delegation, John Kerry, has been highlighting the importance of private sector funding. I think he's 100% right about that. So those are some things. And then we could talk about this. I'm really hopeful there might be some progress on USChina here. So, so I'll just pause there and let you go there.
I think let's dive into the U.S.-China piece. Obviously, we had an unofficial meeting between Special Envoy Kerry and Chief Negotiator Xi Jinping. We have President Biden and Xi Jinping meeting, I think, as we speak currently, in Bali, Indonesia. It seemed like there is an opportunity to reopen the dialogue between the United States and China on climate action that has been put on hold a bit by a host of other issues in the relationship. How do you see that critical relationship for climate action evolving over the next year?
Well, just a quick history here. The U.S.-China relationship has been foundational for multilateral progress. In 2014, when U.S. and China agreed on a set of commitments that laid a foundation for the Paris Agreement. Then this was revitalized at the beginning of the Biden administration. I really hope that we can get back to having constructive dialogue. Look, the U.S. and China have very serious differences on a wide range of issues. I see those differences getting more serious, not less serious in the years ahead. But we have to learn to work together in areas where we have common interests, and this is one of them. And our governments have recognized that. I mean, last year, a year ago at the Glasgow COP, there was an agreement between the two governments that laid out a whole series of ways that we can work together. I hope that can be restarted and then even deepened in the years ahead. It's in both countries' interest to do that. One of the main areas of cooperation that was highlighted a year ago was on methane emissions. That's an area where we can work together from a policy standpoint, a technology standpoint. There's interesting complementarity because in China, the main source of methane emissions is from the coal sector. The U.S. is from the oil and gas sector. So, some and agriculture is important in both countries too, by the way. So I think there's some important ways we can work together. I hope that can get restarted at this COP.
And of course, coming out of the last COP, we had the global methane pledge, which I think is, one of the things I've noticed over the past week and a half or so is how do you take those next steps? And speaking of implementation, how do you take those next steps on the global methane pledge? And I think you're right. The U.S. and China need to be on the same page in terms of advancing the conversation around methane. It's just a matter of how do you distill cooperation in those veins beyond the broader geopolitics, which, you're right, only seem to be getting worse. But stepping away from the U.S. and China for a moment, I think one of the really interesting things we've seen at this COP in particular is massive aggregation of stakeholders from the private sector and NGO. I think when we were chatting just before we started, you mentioned this is a conference where you're seeing all your friends and frankly, a lot of people who you've worked with in the past going back to COP1. How do you see the conversations at this COP, moving us forward on climate action? We're almost done with this COP. It's been a vast 2 weeks. The next COP we see is going to be in Dubai at the UAE, COP28. It's going to be one of the biggest COPs for energy, it seems, right? And we see that signaling coming out both of this COP and what we're hearing from the UAE government on kind of the themes we're looking at in the lead up to next November. What are you hoping to see come out of this COP and build us towards COP28 next year?
Well, Reed, first let me just highlight an announcement that was made by my center, the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. We announced a new energy opportunity lab with tremendous seed gift from Matt Harris of our board. And that's going to look at how marginalized communities around the world can both help address the climate change problem, but also be protected from the impact of climate change. I think that's an example of the type of activity that I hope comes out of this COP. That around the world, that university centers like ours, businesses, NGOs, governments, really take action to look at how developing countries can be helped. Then there's the intergovernmental process. In the intergovernmental process, I hope that we'll see some teeing up of the global stock take, which is a very important mechanism that's going to be discussed next year. I hope we'll see some progress in adaptation. There's a lot of discussion about that here and launching a real progress in adaptation. The hot topic here is loss and damage. I hope we don't see a breakdown on loss and damage because I think there's more risk of a breakdown, unfortunately, than there is of progress. But fingers crossed we can make some progress in bringing stakeholders together on that topic.
Yeah, I think if anything, you've just painted the landscape of the variety of issues we still have to address as we move forward through this COP process. Loss and damage to adaptation. To the prevailing geopolitics surrounding all of these negotiations. We got a lot of work to do. So, David, thank you so much for joining us. This has been great.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
It's great.
Take care.
Cool.